My story begins way back in 1639. My ancestor, Thomas Fairchild, and his wife, Emma Seabrook, sailed across the Atlantic from their home in England as part of the Puritan exodus. In 1640, their son, Samuel, was the first white child born in Stratford, Connecticut. Samuel grew up, got married, raised his own family. His grandson, Oliver, fought in the Revolutionary War, probably against the descendants of Englishmen who'd been Thomas's neighbors a few generations before. After the war, the Fairchilds settled in Granville, New York, and it was there, on December 27, 1801, that I was born. Jarius Fairchild, at your service. Jairus is a somewhat unusual name, so for the most part people just refer to me as JC. And thus began a family tradition of giving each other nicknames. I spent my childhood and youthful years in New York State, but when I turned 21, I decided to strike off on my own. In 1822, I moved to Ohio, where I worked as a general merchant, gradually learning about trade and commerce. It was during this time some friends introduced me to Miss Sally Blair, a young woman of extraordinary grace and intelligence. In 1826, we were married. Almost immediately, we started a family. Our first child was a daughter, Sarah. A son quickly followed, named Cassius, whom we called Cash. On my 30th birthday, Lucius, whom we called Lush, was born. And then our happy family was stricken with sadness when a third son, James, died in childbirth. Soon after our loss, we moved to Franklin Mills, Ohio. I built the first brick house in that township and operated a tannery making leather goods. Now, my business partner was a man named Owen Brown. His name is unfamiliar to you, I'm sure, but I'm guessing you've heard of his son, John Brown. See, the Browns and I were ardent abolitionists. If you recall, my grandfather Oliver fought against the tyranny of monarchy and for the principle that all men are created equal. So it follows that we should do anything we could to resist that other tyranny, the tyranny of slavery. But our tannery business was not doing well enough to support my growing family, so in 1834 we moved to Cleveland. I obtained a position of a Great Lakes Customs official and also became secretary of the Cleveland and Newburgh Railroad Company. And during our 10-year stay in Cleveland, our fifth and final child was born, a son named Charlie. Still, it was clear to me I needed to seek greater opportunities for advancement. So, in 1845, I made my way to the Wisconsin Territory. Leaving my family behind, I went first to Milwaukee and then to Madison. In June of 1846, Sally and our 4 children joined me. Immediately, I became active in business ventures in our new home. I made investments in the cranberry and forestry industries, operating a sawmill and running timber down the Wisconsin River. I also became active in local politics. When Wisconsin became the 30th state admitted to the Union in 1848, I was elected the first state treasurer, a position I held until 1852. Meanwhile, our family was growing up and seeking lives of their own. In 1849, a friend of ours, Abiel Brooks, put together a group of prospectors that included Lush. They were going to California, where the gold rush was in full swing. As my son prepared for the expedition, I couldn't help but think how my ancestors had braved the perils of a transatlantic voyage, and now one of my own children was preparing for an equally dangerous transcontinental adventure. When he set off from Madison on that spring day, the whole family waved goodbye with tears in our eyes. Now, the best antidote for sadness, I believed, was work. I started a brickyard and made investments in the development of the downtown area. I built stores and had a 1/3 interest in the Vilas Hotel. But my business ventures were short of cash. And when Lush returned from California in 1856, I had to ask him for financial support. He gladly shared his bounty from the goldfields, but it was not easy for me to be indebted to my son. Oh, now this might be difficult for you to imagine, but in 1840, Madison was just a village with only about 400 residents. Now, they were ably served by Peter Van Bergen as village president. He operated the Madison Hotel, which was a boarding house used by the workers who built the Capitol in 1848. He built the original Congregational Church and opened the first theater in Madison. Yes, Van Bergen had prepared Madison well for the next step in its development, which was to be incorporated as a city. Now, the administration in Washington, D.C. had yet to permit the building of a post office in Madison, but that didn't stop the incorporation, which took place on March 4th, 1856. 1 week later, on March 11th, I had the honor to be elected the first mayor of the city of Madison. Now, in my inaugural address, I urged the new city to take important steps toward the betterment of our citizens' lives. It was an ambitious slate of proposals, but we were a rapidly growing community, and I felt our future depended on bold ideas. I stressed the importance of good citizenship and the privilege of using the vote rather than force to bring about democratic reform. Now, remembering a cholera epidemic that swept through Madison in 1854, I proposed clean, free drinking water for all inhabitants. I proposed the building of a civic auditorium, as well as constructing sidewalks, planting shade trees, and paving our roads. Education was a main interest, so I suggested we ensure all of our schoolhouses were warm in winter and well ventilated in summer. I urged the city to organize a fire department and supply it with the necessary equipment. And lastly, I proposed the building of a city hall and a market house for year-round trade. At the end of my one-year term in 1857, I was a candidate for governor at the Wisconsin Democratic Party convention, but I lost the nomination to James Cross. Now, that was also the year that I was president of the Madison Watertown Railroad Company, a prospective venture which failed during the general economic slump in the country. Not even the efforts of Lucius, who had ridden hundreds of miles around the state to convince farmers to invest in our railroad, could bring us back from the brink. But Sally and I were fortunate to see our daughter Sarah married to E.B. Dean, a successful Madison businessman, and our 3 boys made headway in local politics. But all of our lives were upended in 1861 with the outbreak of the war between the states. Now, I freely admit I was not a big supporter of Abraham Lincoln, but I was proud to see all 3 sons join the Union cause. Cassius and Lucius both served with the Wisconsin Volunteer Infantry, and Charles served as a paymaster in the Union Navy. Unfortunately, I never got to see the outcome of their endeavors. Due to the pressures of my political life and the hardships I endured in my business ventures, I simply ran out of strength. In the summer of 1862, I fell ill and died. But I'd like to think that Sally and I left behind a strong legacy through our children. And I'd like to think the name of Fairchild will always be associated with all that is best in Madison.